Okay, welcome. Thank you for inviting me today. It's a real honour to be up here. I was driving my children to school this morning, and my son asked me what I was going to be doing today, which in itself is a minor miracle. But actually, I said, I'm going to be talking to quite a few people about love. Is that love? What are you talking about love for? He said, how long have you been talking for? I said, well, probably about 45 minutes. He said, you can't talk about love for 45 minutes. It's not that complicated. So what I'm going to hope to do today is just try and keep it simple and just do a little bit of justice. So, actually, before I start, did anybody watch Love Actually over Christmas, over the holidays? Yeah? Got a few fans? Any fans of Love Actually? Come on, please. Yeah, got a few? Cool. I can admit to my guilty pleasure of Love Actually. I did watch it over Christmas, which is what I do every Christmas Day. It just reminded me, I was kind of half thinking about this, and just reminded me of all the different types of connections that we have with different people. It's not just romantic love, and this talk really isn't just about romantic love at all. It's about the different connections that we build with people. And sometimes they can be in the oddest of places. This, of course, is young Sam with his stepdad, and he's just recently lost his mum, for the people who haven't watched the film. And the stepdad is really worried about some recent behaviours of Sam's. And what Sam's really concerned about, of course, is the agony of love. And that's just kind of says different ways of thinking about it. Okay, so what I'm going to be talking about today is the importance of connections. Talking about being close to other people and how within that we manage our emotional regulation skills. Talking about the patterns of relationships and dancing the dance, how we learn a template of how we relate to other people. And why does love actually matter? What is it within love that allows us to mobilise change? Okay, so the importance of connections, that's what I'm going to focus on to begin with. We know that we're born with an innate need for closeness to other people. We're born with this for evolutionary reasons. We need to have proximity to other people. We need to seek proximity. If we don't, we're not going to survive. So there's an evolutionary need to seek that closeness. We know also we need that for emotional reasons. Sue Gerhardt, I have to say I pinched her title. I love the idea of why love matters. It's such a beautiful title. But Sue Gerhardt is a psychologist and collated all the evidence, all the research around what the importance of love. We've talked a lot today already, I think, about the kind of neuroscience of how the brain works, how the brain functions. Sue and many other researchers have looked at the real importance of how love impacts on the way that we're wired up. From in vitro, so before we're born, and in those very early months of being born, the closeness of the other person, the proximity of that other person really impacts on how we learn to think about ourselves, how we learn to think about our relationship with other people. It's really, really important. I can't remember, I think it might have been Kevin earlier saying, it's not just the parenting that's important, it's actually the wider picture, the wider spectrum of people who are out there, the significant other people who also build resilience in our young children. So it's really important to remember that. We live in villages, we live in towns and societies, in schools, and schools are such a big place for people to start learning about emotional regulation, to start building resilience. Okay. We know that there's some kind of real building blocks that we all need. This was originally written for children, in fact, but of course as adults we all need these things in our lives. We all need sleep. I certainly need sleep. Who doesn't need sleep in here? We all need socialising. We need to be in relationships with other people. We need food, and we need it at the right time, not just when it's given to us, but at the right time. We need warmth. It was getting a bit chilly in here earlier, actually, wasn't it? We need to feel a bit special every now and again, and to kind of feel we've got a little bit of attention on us. We know that praise is one of the most important things. And boundaries. Play, having some fun. It's not all about working hard. Belonging, safety, attention, predictability. We know that the most important things out of all of these, what would you say is the most important things actually? I mean, they're all really, really important, aren't they? But we know from research. Yeah. Who said that? Yeah. Cuddles are the most important thing. Harlow did study of monkeys in the late 50s. he wired up a wire mesh of a monkey and another wire mesh, but put lots of soft, comfortable stuff all over it. The monkeys always went to the one with the lovely soft stuff all over it, even though the other one had the food on it. The rhesus monkeys still went to the one with the soft stuff on it. When danger was introduced to the situation, the monkeys automatically always went to the soft, cuddly monkey. Not a real monkey, it's a wired-up monkey. So it just kind of shows that even when danger is introduced, we go to where we feel safe. We seek that proximity with that person with whom we feel safe. This kind of helps us think, Harlot, this is quite a controversial study, but it does just help us think about, as young children, what we do, how we seek out these relationships. And of course, we go to the people who make us feel safe, the people who help us feel contained, the people who help us process our difficult feelings, our difficult emotions. And it's a job of that significant other person to just hold, when you're a young baby, a child, and you're just growing up, to be able to hold those difficult emotions that you might be experiencing. Some of them are before you can talk. So how do we know what to do with them? You need somebody else to digest that information for you, give it back to you in a way that you can manage, in a way that you can then hold. And it's really important to have people like that in our lives. We know it's really crucial for children, but I'm going to talk through this presentation of actually how important it is throughout our adult life to have people around us who can support us in doing that. It's in those early relationships that we learn how to regulate those difficult feelings and those difficult emotions. I'm going to skip that one. And just think about, so I am really privileged to run an emotional regulation group within NLP. The group is based on the premise that we know in NLP that actually lots of people who end up using substances do so because that's how they regulate their emotions. And this is what people tell us all of the time. If you're really struggling with strong, overwhelming, difficult emotions, with feelings, with things that you can't manage, actually it's quite seductive, isn't it, to use something that's going to take that away from you. So we in NLP run an emotional regulation group. Lots of my service users who come through that group describe the kind of feeling of being on a train track, a rail track. You just can't get off it. There's absolutely no brakes. You have to just keep on it. And you might find yourself, or they describe finding themselves in one place in one moment, something really impulsive happens, and they're doing something they really don't want to be doing the next moment. And that might be something like using substances, it might be harmful behaviour, something that's quite destructive or unhealthy to themselves. Now, of course, all of us have emotional regulation skills. We all use emotional regulation. Who here's got a smartphone on them? Yeah, direct line to social media? Who here cooks tea occasionally and looks at social media because actually you can't bear the boredom of what it is that you're doing? Yeah, we all do. That's managing, that's regulating emotions, isn't it? And I like to think of it as a bit of a continuum. So we all have skills, we all have strategies, but it depends on the impact that they have in your life and how problematic they become. I think of it as going from 0 to 60 without 1 to 59 in the middle. So you're just going from one place to another without that stopgap, absolutely no breaks in the middle. I did a research audit recently on people who've been with us for more than 4 years, service users who've been with us for more than 4 years, and we asked them, why do you think you use substances? How have you made sense of using substances? And this is just a quote that one of them said to me, I had a horrible life, but heroin made me feel brave, held me up during the day, wrapped me in cotton wool, and made me feel warm. It's kind of understandable why somebody might want to use heroin. I'm not advocating it at all, but actually, I'm not condoning it, but you can understand why people might want to do it. People are sometimes between a rock and a hard place. If they use heroin, of course, there's all the consequences, the horrors that can introduce to your life. If they don't use it, sometimes they're going to deal with some pretty difficult stuff. So it really is a rock and a hard place. And I think we need to get our heads around that. Using drugs isn't always just a choice. It's for some people, and it's a recreational choice for some people. But for some people, it's a way of managing, a way of coping. So just a quick kind of, I won't focus on this for too long, but just a bit of a kind of pattern of how this can pan out. I haven't got the doobly-doo, but I'll go through it anyway. So if we start on the star bit, unmanageable feelings, you feel very out of control, very vulnerable. If you haven't had the kind of opportunity to have somebody who's going to nurture you through your own experiences and help you manage and process those really difficult feelings, you're likely to look for something else. It might be that you feel that you can't face them. I can't do this. I need to avoid these feelings. Oh, thank you. The green one? Okay. So you need to look for something. If your something, and we all have our something, if your something is to use drugs and alcohol, it works. It's going to blank you off from the difficult feelings, give you an illusion of being more in control. Of course, the aftermath of that is all these different consequences: long-term damage to relationships, work health, self-esteem, lose inhibitions, your behaviour might change, you feel numb, dead, short-term withdrawal problems. All of these will reinforce the idea that feelings are unmanageable and too difficult, too painful. So, of course, next time you feel anything tapping into that, you use again, because it worked for that moment in time. Yeah, does that kind of make sense? Yeah? Okay. Professor Alexander, who's a Canadian psychologist, I think it was in the 70s, did an experiment called the Rat Park. People familiar with this experiment? Yeah. So he set up a cage, and he had rats in the cage, and he had one water bottle, which was just water, and another water bottle, which was water laced with drugs. And I think it may have been heroin, but I'm not entirely sure, but certainly laced with drugs. In this very limited situation, the rats unanimously took the water bottle with the drugs in, and they poisoned themselves, they overdosed, and many of them died. So in that situation, clearly we can ascertain that rats will prefer water with drugs in it, okay? What he then went on to do, because he kind of thought a bit more about this and wondered about, well, I need to kind of explore this a bit further. And he set up a rat park, what he called a rat park, and apparently, I don't know what rats enjoy particularly, but apparently it was rat heaven, so it had everything in it that you could imagine a rat would want. Full of other rats, full of being able to interact, being able to engage with each other, lots of enriching materials. Set up the same water bottles again, one with water and drugs. The one with water and drugs wasn't touched, or it may have been touched occasionally, but certainly wasn't used to excess. So what Professor Alexander is suggesting from that is that actually in the right environment, people aren't going to use drugs. It's the environment, it's the relationships, it's the conditions that push people to use drugs. It's the stress that people are experiencing that do that. Not the substance itself. Now, of course, we've got a human example of this, haven't we? The Vietnam War. 20% of the troops out in Vietnam became addicted to heroin. On return back to USA, 95% stopped using heroin. That's a massively tremendous success rate, isn't it? I mean, that's quite incredible, really, that should happen. And again, that kind of demonstrates that these people went out there, they were in horrendous conditions, they come back to much better conditions, hopefully, and they don't need to use something to regulate their emotions. So this bit of what I'm trying to say really is that we seek attachments, we seek proximity to others, closeness to others, and it's within that we start to learn about ourselves. We have needs. We invite other people to help us meet those needs. The needs create some sort of stress. We ask for help. The needs get met. We relax. We soothe. Needs get met again. We have confidence that they can be met. When they're not met, and if we think back to the building block slide, when they're not met, we start to produce, and I think you've probably been talking about this today already, but we start to produce cortisol. And actually that makes us really, really anxious. And our brain doesn't function quite so well. Our prefrontal cortex just stops working. It becomes a bit overwhelmed. I'm sure any of the speakers who've been up on here today probably have that. I certainly did for the first sort of few minutes of being up here. Flooded with cortisol, flooded with adrenaline, and we don't function very well. What we need, and I'm going to keep saying this, is an attachment to other people to help us reduce that cortisol, regulate that chemical involvement in our brain, and enable us to relax a little bit more. A critical way that we learn to do that, which is what I've been saying, is through other people. Other people support us in doing that. Okay, so I'm just going to talk about patterns of relationships. Again, this is a clip from Love Actually. You're just going to have to indulge me, I'm afraid. But this is Sarah and Carl, I think they're called. And this is Sarah's brother, who constantly makes demands. He's got mental health needs, makes lots and lots of demands on Sarah. She's constantly answering her phone to him. Interrupts a really critical romantic moment, I believe.
Totally unrealistic.
Well, yeah. But the reason I put it up here is just to say that actually, I suspect he meets her needs almost as much as she meets his. And we get engaged in types of relationships that help us manage patterns, help us avoid things that we don't otherwise want to face. She may well be struggling in relationships, and actually it supports her to constantly be needed, to have her brother on the end of the phone for her. So the reason I'm putting, I don't really want to get into the ins and outs of Love Actually or the relationships within Love Actually, but just to say, just to demonstrate that actually relationships aren't always that simple, are they? We get involved in different dances, different patterns. What do we need in relationships? That's not a rhetorical question. It's
Cuddles.
Cuddles, support, trust. What sort of respect, reassurance.
Acceptance.
Sorry.
Acceptance.
Acceptance. Yeah, absolutely. We need lots of things. We get lots of things from relationships, don't we? Yeah, our needs get met within relationships. I've just pulled a few things up one head. Certainly not yet, I haven't, but certainly not comprehensive, but just from the emotional regulation group that I facilitate, some of the things that the service users who attend that have told me about what we need in relationships. Self-awareness, really crucial. You've got to know who you are in a relationship in order to be able to relate to the other person, to know what's your stuff and what's their stuff. Compassion. I'm not talking about the fluffy, friendly, sort of compassion. I'm talking about that quite hard ability to be accountable, to be responsible, to be able to set limits, to set boundaries. That sort of compassion. The sort of compassion that when I go home at night and I've had a bit of a stressful day, I think I'll go to the biscuit tin, because that's what I really want to do, is go to the biscuit tin and have a biscuit. Compassion is about saying, I'm not going to go to the biscuit tin, I'm going to put the lid on it for tonight and walk away, step away from the biscuit tin. So compassion is about sometimes doing what you don't really want to be doing. About respect, which somebody's already said. I just thought this was a beautiful quote that one of the service users said. It's about to be a better person when you're with that person. To put first, and to be able to challenge, which is really also about compassion, isn't it? And to have a little bit of love in there, maybe. Okay, so when we think about relationships and think about the kind of, in early experiences, we get a bit of a template of how we relate to other people. There's a guy called Tony Ryle who's written lots and lots about relationships in relationship to cognitive analytic therapy. And he talks about the dance that we get into with other people. And we learn the dance when we're very young, and we repeat that dance often. We invite people into our lives to dance that dance with us. If we only know one dance, I'm not going to back to do the waltz or anything like that, but if you only know, the waltz or the tango, actually that's all you're only ever going to have in your life. And if that waltz or tango is quite destructive, it kind of limits you really, doesn't it? What we need to be able to do is widen that repertoire of dances and include a salsa or a dancer. I haven't watched Strictly enough this year, clearly. But it's about having enough dancers under our belt that we can relate, we can be adaptable and flexible, and be able to have different people in our lives, and have some of these things that we were just talking about. I'm not going to go back, because I'll ruin it all, but some of the qualities that you were just talking about in relationships. And you need to that self-awareness, because you need to know what your dance is. What is it that you invite people into to dance with you? some of the kind of typical patterns of relationships that have been identified through cognitive analytical therapy and other things, I'm sure too, are about how we give and receive care. How do we negotiate that? How do we go about doing that? I'm thinking about this particularly in terms of if we've got carers in here, which clearly we have, if we've got practitioners in here, we've got service users in here, how do we go about kind of negotiating the care that we receive, the care that we ask for? And it's likely that you'll repeat the patterns that you learned early on in your early experiences. If you learnt that you have to jump up and down and absolutely tear the house down to get any attention, that might be what you continue to do for your adulthood. It might be adapted and flexible, of course, but that might be a predominant pattern through your adulthood. You might have learned, actually, there's no point. Nobody listens to me anyway. So I'm just not going to ask for any help. I'll just do it myself. I'll just plod on and do it myself. And that might become a pattern for your life. So all these patterns, these ways of relating, really have an impact on who we become, on our well-being. So the lack or the loss of acknowledgement of care is another biggie, isn't it? How do we ask for that? How do we manage that? If there isn't another person there, if we can't access that other person. Closeness or distance. So I spoke a few moments ago about, when we're born, we immediately try and seek proximity to other people. It's an absolute evolutionary need. It's kind of written up in attachment theory. If seeking closeness actually becomes something that's quite uncomfortable and for some people quite dangerous, then you're going to retreat, aren't you? And you become distant from that person. But we're impelled to seek closeness. We want to do that all the time. We get close. If that's dangerous, you retreat. So it's about kind of that. I mean, that's just an example. That's a pattern. There's many, many patterns, of course. But it's about how do we do that, closeness or distancing. For some people, they need to be close all of the time and actually can't tolerate any distance at all. And that creates lots of anxiety for them. It becomes very, very difficult. Control, submission. How do we manage that? And abuse and victimisation. So we're invited into dances, aren't we? And it's a strong, strong invitation from some people. And we feel quite compelled to meet people's demands. We certainly, when I'm talking quite a lot to healthcare practitioners, I talk about the kind of compulsion to help, to care. And you get drawn into this, we get quite a lot out of it, actually. It's quite a selfish kind of need to be needed and to care for other people. We end up, I think, we could get in a dance of rescuing and making things all right for everybody, not allowing people to be independent, not allowing them to take responsibility for their own actions. Again, that's just a pattern. There's many, many patterns that we get invited into. And the reason I'm talking about this now is it just feels so important to make a little bit of sense of the way we relate to other people. It's in that relating that we start to learn a little bit about ourselves and who we are. I meant to say at the beginning I was going to quote a bit of Rolling Stones. I was going to do a little bit of psychological theory and a bit of the Rolling Stones. You can't always get what you want, but if you try sometimes, well, you might just get what you need. And that, for me, is what compassion's all about. It's about, within those relationships, within that negotiation, within the dance, the waltz, the tango, it's about, you don't always get what you want, but getting what you need is sometimes far, far more important. And sometimes that can be quite uncomfortable, can't it, getting what you need? You might be told something, you really don't want to hear it. But actually, that's what you need to hear. It can be quite difficult, though. Yeah? So, Ginger Rogers did everything Fred Astaire did, but backwards and in high heels. I was going to say we all find ourselves in high heels and dancing backwards sometimes, don't we? But I've already got some shakes of the head. Come on, admit it. But I think we do. We all find ourselves kind of in that position of being in a relationship, in a dance, that how did I get here? How did this happen? And that might be in a therapeutic relationship, it might be with your practitioner, your key worker, it might be with your carer, it might be with the person you're caring for, a family member, a whole host of different types of relationships where you might realise that actually you're doing the dancing backwards. You're not quite sure how that happened. Yeah. I did hear this, I hadn't heard this quote actually, somebody told me a week or two ago, but I did hear in relation to David Bowie the other day, saying about he did all of this, and he did it in a culture where actually nobody wore high heels and nobody kind of wore the clothes that he was wearing. So, and it just really made me think about, sometimes we are doing this and we're pushing ideas, we're pushing cultural values that people aren't quite there with, yeah. And, you know, I'm thinking about things like stigma and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so the third bit I really want to talk about is the kind of how within love, within good relationships, we can start thinking about mobilising change. The importance of, you know, the good that it can do for us. This is just a quote by Alexander Chalmers, the Scottish guy. 3 grand essentials of happiness are something to do, someone to love, and something to hope for. Of course, today I've been talking about there's someone to love, but they're all connected, aren't they? It's within relationships that we often find things to do, or we do things, and in doing the activities, we find people we like being around. We're interested in them. There's something to hope for. I've been really privileged lately to hear some of our peer mentors talk at public events, and what they've said often is having key workers who've held hope for them has been absolutely fundamental in their recovery, and that just feels absolutely crucial to me, that when you can't hold hope, somebody else can hold hope. And I think Kevin said something like that earlier on today, actually, that having just maybe a handful of people can transform your lives, and it's those people that can sometimes do the things for you when you can't do it for yourself. We know, of course, that it's not just NSFT, but the 5 ways to wellbeing include a lot of these things too. Bakhtin's a Russian philosopher. Without any mediation by the loving other, a human being could never have begun to speak about him or herself. And that's exactly what I'm saying. Without that other person in your life, or other people in your life, it's really hard to kind of know where you're at, isn't it? You need a mirror almost to just bounce things off. Who phones somebody up when you're struggling with something, or goes and talks to somebody when you're struggling, or you're not quite sure, you've got a difficult decision to make, yeah? I don't know, you're not quite sure what to do about something, so you'll go and find somebody to talk to about it. You might find somebody who will tell you what you want to hear, but we still go and talk to other people about it, don't we? And it's in doing that we start to form our own ideas. Michael Parkinson, I heard this story a while ago. Michael Parkinson was chat show host, and he was talking about a guest who, and I think it might have been Billy Connolly, but I can't quite remember, who frequently, too many frequently, went onto his show. And he said to him, so why do you keep coming on here? What's this all about? You keep coming back, you're not plugging books anymore, what are you doing? And he said, it's actually because when I come back and I talk to you, and I talk about things, I start to understand what it is I think about myself and about the things around me. It's only through talking that I start to make sense of it all. There's something really important in that. When you start talking about something, it starts to make a little bit of sense. I think I heard this on the radio as well, but something about, I love you enough to not let you behave like that. And that's about it goes back to the idea about compassion, goes back to the Rolling Stones quote, but about having limits and being able to say those things that are a little bit uncomfortable and pushing people a little bit. So when I'm talking about love, of course we all think about romanticised love, we think about love actually, all that kind of lovely, lovely stuff. But love actually, for me, is that real critical bit where you can afford to push the boundaries a little bit, where you can do the challenges, and it's safe enough to do that. We know that overwhelming psychological research suggests that it's a therapeutic relationship that's the most important thing. It doesn't matter if people receive CBT, CAT, psychodynamic, it really doesn't matter. What the most fundamental ingredient is the quality of the psychotherapeutic relationship, and that's what really, really matters. Again, going back to the 4 Year Plus project that I did, one of the questions was what's helped. many people said that the most important thing was the quality of the key worker and the closeness of the key worker. Said it's confidential, which is a lot better than a friend, and supports me through hard times. It feels like that was really important for people, just to have somebody consistently there. So it's about the quality, but it's also about the consistency of having somebody there. I can't stand on a stage like this in front of this amount of people and not mention NRP groups. We, again, I think we really recognise the importance and the value of engaging people in starting to make sense of why they're using substances, engaging them in ways of developing new skills, creating new ideas, moving them forwards. And that came out in the 4-year plus project, that actually people found group sessions to be really helpful. And again, I think that's been mentioned today. So we're not just talking about, I'm really not just talking about one-to-one relationships. I'm talking about within groups, within different environments that people are all interacting. We're a big group in here today, aren't we? And of course, people are going to be talking, networking. And what's come out time and time again from our evaluations on the NRP groups is that it's the peer support that works. Having a practitioner sitting at the front telling you how to do it is certainly not the most helpful thing at all. It's sharing experience, sharing advice between the peers within the group. And of course, there's many types of groups, aren't there? I'm talking about NRP psychosocial groups, but there's sporting groups, there's just a whole range of groups. Well, are people here kind of involved in various groups at all? There's various groups within here, aren't there, I'm guessing? Yeah? Okay, and it's within those that actually we can start exploring new ways of being. We talked about, if you're using substances, and the importance of changing your environment, moving, maybe, for some people, actually moving from city to city, or from one city to another city. But changing your environment is really important. Changing the people you're hanging out with is really important. It has the added effect that you might end up doing something you really like, which goes back to Chalmers' quote of doing something that you like to do is absolutely critical. So what I've really been talking about today is the importance of connections, the importance of relationships, the early experience, how that impacts on us, how that builds us a template. What I really must emphasise is we do know from lots of research that the brain is considered to be plasticity. So with plastic, the wiring we're not hardwired. We can change. So while we're born with a certain amount of wiring, and the relationships are crucial, are significant in developing that wiring, we know that we can adapt, and that's malleable. We can learn new ways of being, and that's really important. So actually, if it feels like you're stuck sometimes, we can move on and do something else. Yeah. Just a quick exercise, actually, just while I'm talking about change and the potential of kind of changing our wiring. This has got nothing to do with relationships at all, but it's just a bit of fun. But just cross your hands. I'm at risk of losing my wiring here if I do this. Just cross your hands. Yeah. Fold your arms. Fold your arms in the most comfortable way. Okay, you're all nice and comfortable. Okay, just fold them in the way that's really uncomfortable now. And just keep doing it. Keep folding them in the way that's really uncomfortable. Yeah, keep going. This isn't a Dan Brown experiment, I promise you. We're not going to have okay, is it now becoming a bit more comfortable? Yeah. If you keep repeating behaviours, they become your norm. Yeah? So and we can do it. If you keep repeating that will become the normal way of you to do it. Now, under extreme stress, we will revert back to our default mode, if that's what we know best. That's what attachment theory tells us. So if under extreme stress we do something that's quite destructive, we'll revert back to that until we've learnt something different, until we've got a different way of doing it. Yeah? So you need to practice that other way of doing it when you're actually not under extreme stress, and then that allows you, when you hit the extreme stress, to do it at that time. So we've talked a little bit about emotional regulation. and the impact on that on your behaviour and the strategy, and that ability then to develop new connections, new relationships, and that's where people start to mobilise change. Okay, I've been standing here a little while, and I know this is really indulgent to do another Love Actually quote, but I can't resist that, I'm afraid. So, if you look for it, I've got a sneaky feeling you'll find that love actually is all around the Prime Minister. I'm going to say I just wish our Prime Minister understood some of this stuff, actually. But I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but I just am. So, and then just to finish, I recently heard Jan Hari, who's a journalist. He, from his talk, he apparently has lost some people through substance misuse, and went off and kind of did some research, explored what was going on, what the kind of drug strategy is, what the different ideas are around how we manage substance misuse. And what he found is that it's connection that really, really matters. The opposite of addiction is not sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.